Alright, week 12 is here. This is shaping up to be one of the most exciting weekends we've had all year. With the NYExcel and Dynasty making a return, plus some epic matchups on paper, fans of the Overwatch League should be in for quite the treat. Before going over my annual preview of the week, let's see how I did in week 11. So in the 9 games played, I managed to get 7 of them right, with my 2 blemishes coming from Hunter's Charge as well as Paris, Florida. A solid 7-2 week puts my overall record on the year at 46-24. With how crazy some of the games are this week, I'd be shocked if I managed to put up that type of performance again. Looking at this week now, we start with a preview of the hero pool. The bans for this week will be Orisa, Moira, Tracer, and Echo. Not gonna lie, seeing Echo get banned that fast is tragic, although the amount of playtime she was going to get in the league is up in the air anyway, so it is what it is, I guess. With Orisa and Moira out of the picture though, my meta prediction for this week is that we go back to the standard stuff we saw pre-hero bans. No Orisa means that Reinhardt is going to be the strongest shield tank to run again. Besides that, now Widow, McCree, and Ana are back, so them plus a Mei seems like the likely play here. Now, there is a chance I could be wrong about this being the meta, or maybe there's some variation I'm just not aware of, but this is my general opinion on what will be played. So, with hero pools and meta thoughts out of the way, let's take a look at my week 12 game predictions. First up is the Seoul Dynasty versus the Hangzhou Spark. This weekend is going to be very important in terms of power scaling the Dynasty. Not only will it give us a bigger sample size of gameplay to analyze from them, but it also serves as a way to see how high their potential is in a rotating meta. While the Spark might not be the strongest opponent out there, they still are a relatively good team, so beating them convincingly would further help establish Seoul as one of the better teams in the league. So, do they have what it takes to pull this off? Well, in my opinion, they absolutely do. Listen, when you have Prophet on your team, anything is possible, and the crew around him is very versatile. Seoul has a handful of pieces that they can move around to achieve maximum effectiveness. This especially goes for their tank line. In their debut week, we saw Marvel and Gesture get the time on stage, as their Orisa Sigma proved to be very valuable. Now with D.Va in play, it's within reason to assume that Michelle starts. Does this mean Seoul might have a decrease in performance? I mean, probably not, right? Marvel and Michelle have been playing together for a long time now, and have proven to be a very consistent and effective duo. And even if Gesture does play above Marvel, I still think that him and Michelle could make for a good duo too. So now let me think about this matchup wise. Let's compare them to the Spark. While Gushue plus either Rhea or Sasin is also a decent tank line, I for one give the Soul Tanks the edge because of the better overall synergy. As for DPS, Godspeed in my opinion is a little better than Fitz in the Hitscan matchup, but it's not by a noticeable margin, and Prophet in all likelihood will be the best Mei player in the server, as both Bazzi and Adora have not been all that impressive on her as of late. Then finally on support, Badoshin and Bebe are pretty close, but IDK in my opinion is noticeably better than Toby. When you tally all of that up, the clear advantage has to go to Seoul, even if we don't know if they can consistently dominate in the way they did against both LA teams. So my pick for this one is a 3-1 Dynasty victory. They hold the advantage in more individual matchups, and as a unit, I believe they'll have the better synergy and teamwork. Also, they have Prophet, who outclasses any DPS player the Spark have. I'm going to say that Prophet has a big game, as the Spark can't keep up with his explosive playmaking abilities. On to the next match. The Charge are going to try their luck once again against the Dragons. Can this finally be the day where they beat them, or will Shanghai continue to be a nightmare matchup that they just can't figure out? While anything is possible, I'm not ready to say the Charge are worthy of taking down the Dragons yet. I don't care if they know them well at this point. I said it in the last video and I'll say it again. Until one of these Chinese teams can beat the Dragons again, I refuse to go against them in any of these matchups. Sure, the meta is fairly different compared to the other times they've played, but why should I believe this week will be different from the others? With 2 clean sweeps over the Charge under their belts already, it's obvious that they have their number, and no meta seems to be able to change that. Unless the Charge drastically improve, the result will likely be the same. Shanghai has so many tools to work with that allows for them to thrive in any given week. It's funny too, because on paper, the Charge players match up decently with the ones on Shanghai. The Charge have the talent needed to compete, but for some reason the Dragons are better. Their execution and game planning is in a different universe. So, with that in mind, I am going to predict the Dragons to win this series 3-1. My guess is that the Charge show signs of improvement, but still prove that they have a long way to go before they're ready to beat the Dragons. In this matchup, it looks like the coaching plays a big role in why the results have consistently been this way. Coach Moon and his staff seem to know what is needed to hard counter the Charge. Like I said earlier, until I see evidence to convince me otherwise, I'm expecting the same result. To close out the first day of games taking place in Asia, the NYExcel finally retake the stage, virtual stage, I guess I should say, when they play the Chengdu Hunters. Although it's been a while since the NYExcel have played, we already are well aware of what they're capable of in a May McCree meta. They can play it well. We already know this. However, wins they've gotten have not been against any super impressive opponents so far, and the one time they did play somebody strong, they lost. In my opinion, there is reason to have some slight concerns about New York. I don't care about their reputation. In my opinion, there is a legit chance they lose this game. Besides the whole competition aspect, it's been over a month since the last time they played an official game, and from what I've seen with some of the other top tier teams, a long break can sometimes result in these slow starts with clear signs of rust. Both the Shock and Titans have fallen victim to this already. It really doesn't help that they play Chengdu of all teams as well. These guys are known for being a matchup nightmare. We already saw it all of last year and a little bit this year as well, as that unpredictable and unusual style of theirs can give any team in the league all sorts of trouble, as evidenced by the fact that in just 4 weeks, both the Dragons and Titans have fallen to them. No amount of preparation can help you be ready for what Chengdu throws at you at times. They're by far the most confusing team in the game, and all it really comes down to is whether or not New York can show enough mid-game adaptations here. In all honesty, the NYExcel are a better team. Plain and simple, they're more talented and they have better potential. However, my gut feeling is telling me that the NYExcel struggle to get it going. Somehow, some way, the Hunters are going to throw them off guard. It's not always the case, but there are various scenarios throughout league history where some teams just know how to play the NYExcel the right way. We've seen the Fusion do it time and time again, and even the Reign in Season 2, and the Hunters even demolished them last year as well. I know that times have changed and that this is a massive gamble because I'm basically depending on some very specific circumstances, but in my bold prediction of the week, I have the Hunters defeating the NYExcel 3-2. Here's how I see this game going. The Hunters win the first 2 maps, and then the NYExcel look lost. Then, New York makes the adjustments needed, and they rally back to send it to a map 5. Then, just when it seems like the Hunters are done for, they get their second win and take the last map thanks to their unpredictability and their DPS popping off when it matters the most. Heading into the first game here in America is my first key match of the week when the Fusion and Reign play each other for the second time in 3 weeks. In the last match, it was as close as it can possibly get and a super intense 5-map thriller where the Fusion managed to avoid getting reverse swept. In that game, the Reign tried a few different combinations of DPS. Ultimately, it was pretty obvious that having Erster in the lineup was the way to go, as he ended up being the driving force to get the Atlanta Reign back in that game. So from that, I think if Atlanta knows what's good for them, they'll continue to play Erster now. The question is though, do we continue to see BabyBay play the McCree, or does Edison get a chance to show what he's got this time? From what we've seen so far, the Reign prefer BabyBay in any sort of McCree meta, so my money's on him. That brings up another question though. Can BabyBay hope to keep up with Carpe? BabyBay having a strong performance is going to be key. I can't stress enough how important that is. Carpe has been on a tear in the Fusion Season 3 campaign. For any player, it's a difficult task to shut that guy down, or even keep pace with him for that matter. BabyBay has looked quite good this season. In my opinion, this is the best he's played in a while. However, I don't trust him to be able to consistently go head-to-head with Carpe. In my opinion, he's just not good enough. Like I said though, if BabyBay shows me otherwise, then the Reign have a good shot of winning. Generally speaking, all of the individual matchups are important with this one, as there are major playmakers at every position on each side. You've got Masa versus Funny Astro on primarily Lucio this time, which is really important to look out for. These are 2 of the premier main support players in the league. Who shall prevail and be the better Lucio leads his team to victory? Then there's the Reinhardt battle. That's another one to pay attention to. Whether it's Pokeball or Gator, one of them has the unlucky pleasure of going against a reformed Sato who has been an absolute unit on the Reinhardt this year so far. I can go on and on, but you get the point by now. This is a war between 2 very talented rosters. But who do I think wins this now? I'm going to predict that history repeats itself as the Fusion put their fans into cardiac arrest yet again with another Map 5 victory. In the 4 meetings they've had up until this point, 3 of them have gone to a Map 5. It's as if these 2 are destined to play a close game every time they meet in the regular season. But some of you may be asking, why the Fusion? I have a few simple answers to this. For one, like I mentioned earlier, I believe Carpe's in for a big game that BabyBay just can't match. 2, the Fusion have another player who's superior to his counterpart. No matter what the hero, in my opinion, Alarm has proven time and time again that he is a better and more explosive player than Dogman. And finally, Reason number 3 revolves around the fact that the Reign have yet to prove themselves against top-tier competition. The only teams they have beaten so far are inferior mid to low-tier squads. In their matches with top-tier teams, they lose. Against Paris, they got crushed, and while their game the other week against Philly was close, they still lost. Once the Reign show me they can beat the best teams, I'll consider picking them in these games against strong opponents. But until I see that with my own eyes, I will continue to say they lose the big games. Finishing up Saturday, the Valiant play the Shock for like a third time in a month. The Valiant just can't seem to catch a break with the schedule. Another difficult matchup presents itself. The Shock have been playing a lot better since they went on that little skid, and while they did look shaky against the Fuel at times, they still do have a clear advantage over the Valiant strictly from the perspective of them being more talented. Plus, this type of meta plays up to many of the San Francisco strengths. Super on Reinhardt, Striker and or Ansan on McCree, Rascal on May, Moth on Lucio. It's going to be tough for the Valiant to beat that, no doubt. The good news for the Valiant, though, is that McCree and Widow are back in the rotation again, so KSP can play at full strength. And so long as that guy can pop off, there's always a chance some magic happens. But can he carry enough to beat the Shock for a second time? He'll be the difference maker for sure here. But like any other big game, a team effort is going to be needed to pull this off. I will be looking at the tanks in particular to try and do their part. Dreamer and or Gig need to not lose to Super in the Rhine duel, then McGravy has to take a page from Notebook and outplay Choi Yobin. Because the Valiant have beaten the Shock once before, this is certainly winnable. However, the Shock were in a much worse place back then, so it'll be twice as hard to earn that win this time around. As much as I'd love to see the Valiant pull this off, I do not believe they have the firepower or consistency needed to defeat the Shock yet again. My final score prediction is a 3-1 victory in favor of San Francisco. I'm going to say that the Valiant sneak in a map somewhere during this thanks to some stellar hard carry gameplay from KSP and maybe Lastro or something, but that's going to be all they'll get. Behind some incredible team play that the Valiant can't handle and a strong performance from their tank line, the Shock fly past their opponents and continue to rise up in the standings. Now for day 2. The first game of the day is the Hunters versus the Spark for what feels like the millionth time already. Because we've talked about this matchup so much already, I'll make my preview of this one quick. So in my honest opinion, this matchup will be Spark favored for 2 reasons. 1, I actually really like the Spark in a Reinhardt meta. I absolutely prefer them on it over the heavy shield comps, as I feel their tanks are a lot less capable on like Orisa and Sigma. I've liked the Gushue Rhea and Gushue Sassen combo when they break out the Reinhardt stuff, so I believe they'll be in a good spot there regardless of who they decide to run. My second reason as to why the Spark have the advantage is that the Hunters have 1 extra game to prepare for while the Spark have just the 1. If my NYExcel Chengdu prediction comes true, then my expectation is that the Hunters will show they put all their eggs in the NYExcel basket. Based on the strength of their tank line and the better preparation, I predict that the Spark win this 3-1. So long as the Spark stick to the standard compositions and don't try and match Chengdu on the weird stuff, they should be just fine. Historically speaking, the Spark have never lost to the Hunters before, so knowing how to push their opponents to the brink so well will give them that extra edge needed to win. Game number 7 of the weekend will be the Shanghai Dragons versus the Seoul Dynasty. It goes without saying that this game is going to be drawing a lot of eyeballs towards it. These are 2 of the top 5 potential teams in the league going at each other. Because this could end up being a very exciting thing to witness, I'm going to highlight this as key match number 2 of week 12, and honestly, this might be the best game of the week. There's a lot riding on the line here. This will serve as a great opportunity for both Seoul and Shanghai. Neither of them have faced a high-tier opponent yet. Seoul has beaten both LA teams, and the Dragons have been consistently beating down on the other Chinese teams, but very few, if not any of those teams, are what you'd call elite. A win in this scenario would be great for either party to prove themselves to the rest of the world. If the Dragons win, it further proves they're potential title contenders. If the Dynasty win, or at least keep it close, then those earlier claims of them being one of the best teams becomes more valid. The whole aspect of this game is crazy exciting. Let's talk matchups now. So neither team has consistently played the standard early season meta. Shanghai has shown flashes of it here and there, and Seoul hasn't played the full thing for a single second yet. With that said, the outcome could go in many different directions here. It's hard to predict. Let's break it down. So as I mentioned earlier, the tank lines on both sides should theoretically be rather good on Rhine Diva. In my opinion, if played, Marvel and Michelle are slightly better. Stand 1 and Void have proven to be a formidable duo, but the Seoul tank line has years of synergy and consistent results under their belts, which makes it hard to go against them. So tank-wise, I hold a slight advantage towards Seoul if they play Marvel and Michelle. However, if Stand 1 can look as good as he has all season, then it might be a tough call. Stand 1 is definitely a player to keep your eye on. Now looking at DPS though, I tend to favor Shanghai as a whole. Strictly looking at who has the best player, it's Seoul, because without a doubt, they have Profit. You can't really go against that. But Fleta has looked pretty good this season. He's looked like his old Season 1 self thus far, so I'm confident that he can hold his own in a May mirror matchup even against Profit. What it really comes down to here is fits though. Can we expect him to be as reliable as somebody like Diem or Lip? I don't know. Fitz always has been a guy to surprise people, so if anybody can pull this off, then it's him, but generally speaking, the Shanghai hitscan player should be at least a little bit better in my opinion. Finally, when looking at the support line, I find myself feeling pretty torn. On one hand, Lee Jae-gong, in my opinion, is a better overall player than Toby, even on the Lucio. But on the other hand, you can make the argument that Badoshin is slightly better than both Izayaki and Luffy. These two match up incredibly well with one another on paper. Regardless of who wins, the likelihood of this being a closely contested series is high. It's a very tough decision for me to make, but my guess is that Shanghai wins 3-2. My prediction is that Stand 1 surprises people with a solid showing, while the rest of the team comes in clutch in their biggest game of the season so far. While I still feel pretty torn even as I record this, I see it like this. Seoul has been hyped in the past just to disappoint, so I'm going to take the cautious approach with them. If they beat Shanghai, I'll start hyping them up more. Moving onward, the NYExcel and Charge take the virtual stage. With both of these teams already getting time in the spotlight, let's get straight into the details. New York versus Guangzhou in the mirror match. Who do we take? Generally speaking, the Charge are a hard team to get a grasp on since they are vastly inconsistent, and that, in my opinion, is what puts them at a disadvantage. They have some very appealing pieces on that roster, and yet they've lost to every other team in China at least once. More than anything, it's a matter of execution with them, I feel. We've seen their guys pop off. We know that talent is not the problem with them, it's more of the mental stuff. Decision making and poor execution has been their downfall a lot of the time. Meanwhile, they have to play New York, who very rarely makes those types of mistakes. Because of that, I've got the NYExcel winning this 3-0. Rio has been having ups and downs this year, and you can't afford to show inconsistency against Mono. Behind the play of their superstar main tank and superior strategizing, the NYExcel overpower their opponents in a convincing victory. Before I talk about the next match, I quickly wanted to bring up the fact that Hoppa plays one of his former teams. Let's see who won this breakup. Will Hoppa be the one to prove he's on to bigger and better things, or will the Charge show that Hoppa is no longer needed behind the explosive play of their rookie off-tank? Either way, Hoppa versus Krong is the key player matchup to be looking for here. It's not just the storyline aspect that makes it important though. The person who plays smarter, makes more clutch plays, and shows better peel for their teammates is going to play a big factor in the overall outcome of this game. The Florida Mayhem versus the Boston Uprising is up next. So, Florida beat Paris last week, and they did so in a clean 3-0 no less. That is mighty impressive, even if Paris aren't currently at full strength. The Mayhem are starting to come into their own, and after a win like that one, their confidence is probably through the roof. A win against Boston would give them a nice little jump in the standings if things go their way. Now, usually, I prefer to give at least a little bit of a preview with these matchups, but it's Boston we're talking about here, and they're playing against a team outside of the bottom three, so they don't have a good chance. They are universally recognized as the number 20 team right now. They have won one game the entire year, and it came in embarrassing fashion, and every other game they've been a part of has been a 3-1 or 3-0 loss. They are a terrible team with not much to look forward to. Sorry if that sounds harsh, but that's the truth. Not to mention the fact that they are stuck with the same 6-man lineup until they either sign a new player or Axiom returns from his leave of absence to recover from a medical procedure. They lack confidence, star power, and the assets needed to even have a chance of beating a non-bottom feeder. Because Florida looks way better, this in all likelihood will be a 3-0 for them. They outclass Boston in every way imaginable. They're more talented, they have better coaching, and in general they are more set up for success. In what looks to be a total team effort, I believe Florida pops off and claims victory without breaking a sweat. And last, but certainly not least, Week 12 concludes with the Battle of Texas Season 3 edition. Key match alert, ladies and gentlemen. This is a rivalry. Can a reformed Houston take back the title of best team in Texas, though? I mean, it's certainly possible, but in my opinion, it's going to be an uphill battle. The meta certainly favors Dallas. Decay is a far better McCree than anybody on Houston, and yes, this includes Linkser, and I think I prefer Doha's May over that of Dante and Hydration, so the Outlaws might be in for a rough day here. Not only that, but Guangzhou is superior to Muma in every way in my opinion. This especially goes for Reinhardt due to the simple fact that Guangzhou is the better decision making and supporting cast to keep him alive. However, there are places where Houston can make up for this. In my opinion, the Outlaws do have the slightly better support line when Repel is in the lineup. Repel and Jexe have stood out to me a bit more than anybody Dallas has ran so far. We also have to consider how Meko will do. I know that Note had a really good game against the Shock and all, but Meko in my opinion is still a better player, and he's a consistent piece on that Houston roster that should not be taken lightly. But overall, Dallas looks to be in better shape in more places that really matter to me here, and as hard as Jexe and Repel and Meko might try, I don't think it'll be enough. I also can't even say with confidence that Repel will play over Raucus, as in past weeks where we've had this Ryan May meta with Ana, Raucus has been the one to start. Anyway though, Decay, Doha, and Guangzhou are such big playmakers, and I think having the edge over their counterparts could result in them going on a rampage that is impossible to stop. So, as this match reaches its conclusion, I believe the Dallas Fuel win 3 maps to 1. Besides the whole unstoppable playmaker aspect and this just being a better meta for them, I also think that Dallas is just playing with more confidence right now. That nail-biter against the Shock is evidence of this. After such a wonderful performance where they nearly beat the defending champs, I find it hard to believe that they'd be taken down by a foe who is mid-tier at best. But that's pretty much going to conclude everything I have to say about my predictions in Week 12, so now I turn things over to you guys. What are your predictions for this weekend? Let me know down in the comments section, and if you enjoyed this content and you want more in the future, then be sure to hit that like button and sub if you haven't already. And if you're interested in supporting me beyond my content alone, then consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and purchasing a channel membership for some exclusive perks. And as always, thanks so much for watching today's video, I really do appreciate it, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.